I never thought I'd be the type of woman who would rewrite her will over a snide remark. But when my daughter-in-law, Victoria, looked me straight in the eye and told me I was too shaky to hold my own granddaughter, while my son Daniel stood by silently, something inside me finally shattered, not with a scream or tears, but with a cold, quiet clarity I hadn't felt in years. The trust fund I'd spent decades building, the one that was meant to secure my granddaughter Emma's future, suddenly felt like the last strand of control I had left, so I changed it. And I didn't tell a soul until it was too late for anyone to talk me out of it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The day started like any other Thursday in Lakeside. The spring air carried the scent of blooming cherry trees, and the lake shimmered in the distance as I prepared a basket of freshly baked lemon scones and homemade strawberry preserves. My standing weekly visit to Daniel and Victoria's house in the Pines neighborhood had become a ritual I both cherished and dreaded. The chance to see my 6-month-old granddaughter Emma was worth enduring Victoria's thinly veiled criticisms and my son's uncomfortable silence. I had spent 30 years as the town's head librarian before retiring 3 years ago. My hands had always been steady, cataloging books, repairing damaged spines, guiding children's fingers across pages as they learned to read. The slight tremor that occasionally appeared now was nothing serious. My doctor had assured me it was just age, and possibly a side effect of the blood pressure medication I had started last winter. But to hear Victoria tell it, you'd think I had palsy. "I've brought breakfast," I called out, letting myself in with the key Daniel had given me when Emma was born. The house was quiet, except for the distant hum of Victoria's exercise equipment from their home gym. Their house was a showcase, sleek furniture that looked uncomfortable to sit on, abstract art that probably cost more than my car, and spotless white carpet that made me nervous every time I stepped inside. "In the kitchen, Mom," Daniel called back. I found him scrolling through his phone at the kitchen island, Emma cradled awkwardly in one arm. He barely looked up as I set the basket down and washed my hands at the sink. Victoria had rules about holding the baby, and clean hands were just the beginning. "She's been fussy this morning," Daniel said, bouncing Emma slightly as she began to squirm. Victoria was up half the night with her. "I remember those nights," I said, drying my hands thoroughly. "You used to wake up every 2 hours like clockwork. Your father could sleep through a hurricane, so it was always me walking the floors with you." Daniel gave a distracted nod. Gregory, my ex-husband, had been a surgeon whose career always came first. After 20 years of marriage, he'd left me for a nurse in his practice, but at least he'd had the decency to wait until Daniel was in college. "Can I hold her?" I asked, approaching with arms outstretched. Daniel hesitated, glancing toward the hallway. "Maybe wait until Victoria comes in? She's particular about the handoff routine." I lowered my arms, trying not to let the hurt show on my face. I'd raised a child of my own, had worked with children for decades at the library, yet somehow I needed supervision to hold my own granddaughter. "I brought the photo albums you asked for," I said instead, gesturing to my tote bag. "The ones from when you were a baby. I thought Victoria might like to see if Emma resembles you at the same age." "Oh, right." Daniel managed a smile. "That's great, Mom. Just leave them on the counter and we'll look through them later." I knew later probably meant never. The last set of family recipes I'd brought over still sat in the decorative box I'd placed them in, unopened on a shelf in their pantry. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her designer workout clothes without a drop of sweat, her blonde hair pulled back into a perfect ponytail. She was beautiful in that polished, intimidating way that always made me feel rumpled in comparison, no matter how carefully I dressed. "Margaret, you're early," she said, glancing at the expensive watch on her wrist. I wasn't early. I'd arrived at exactly 10 a.m. as I always did on Thursdays. but I had learned to pick my battles. "Good morning, Victoria. I brought scones and preserves." She eyed the basket with a practiced smile. "That's so thoughtful, but we're actually on a gluten-free trial this month. Daniel's been having some digestive issues that his wellness coach thinks might be wheat-related." Daniel hadn't mentioned any digestive issues during our phone call earlier in the week, but he nodded along. "Thanks anyway, Mom," Emma began, to fuss more insistently, and Daniel looked relieved to have a reason to hand her over to Victoria. "I think she's hungry." Victoria expertly adjusted Emma in her arms, and the baby immediately quieted. "I just prepared a bottle in the warmer. Perfect timing, sweet girl." "I can feed her if you want to finish your workout," I offered, trying to sound casual. Victoria's smile tightened. "Oh, that's okay. We have a very specific feeding position. That helps with her digestion." The lactation consultant was very clear about it. "I see," I said, though I didn't. Bottle positions hadn't been so complicated when Daniel was a baby. I had fed him in whatever way kept him from crying and me from falling over with exhaustion. I watched Victoria settle onto a bar stool, positioning Emma with practiced precision. Daniel had already returned to his phone, fingers tapping rapidly as he answered work emails. "How are things at the community center?" he asked without looking up. I had started volunteering 3 days a week at Lakeside Community Center after retirement, helping with their literacy program and book exchange. "It's going well. We just received a grant to expand the children's section. I'm helping set up a new storytelling corner." "That's nice," Daniel said absently. "You should be careful not to overcommit," Victoria added. "At your age, it's important to pace yourself." "At my age." The phrase that seemed to preface so many of Victoria's suggestions lately. At my age, I should consider a single-level home. At my age, I should probably avoid driving at night. At my age, I shouldn't babysit Emma alone for too long. I was only 65, not ancient, and in good health aside from the mild hypertension. But the way Victoria spoke, you'd think I was one step away from a nursing home. "I manage just fine," I said, keeping my voice light. "Actually, the center director asked if I'd be interested in coordinating the summer reading program this year." "Sounds like a lot of responsibility," Victoria said, not looking up from Emma. "You know, my mother joined that seniors walking group at Evergreen Gardens, and she loves it. Much less stressful than organizing programs." Victoria's mother was 78 and had recently moved into the independent living section of Evergreen Gardens, an upscale retirement community. The subtle suggestion that I should be doing the same wasn't lost on me. "I enjoy being busy," I replied, "and working with the children keeps me young." Emma had finished her bottle, and Victoria expertly raised her to her shoulder for burping. The baby's eyes found mine across the room, and she gave me a gummy smile that made my heart swell. I stood and approached slowly. "She looks happy and alert. May I hold her now?" I asked, my arms already reaching out. Victoria hesitated, and I saw her eyes drop to my hands. I realized I was nervously fidgeting with my wedding band, an old habit I'd never broken, even though Gregory and I had been divorced for 15 years. "Actually, Margaret, I've been meaning to talk to you about something," Victoria said, her voice taking on the careful tone she used when delivering what she considered constructive criticism. "I've noticed your hands seem a bit unsteady lately." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "The tremor in your hands seems to be getting worse," she continued. "Have you considered seeing a specialist about it?" I felt a flash of anger. "My doctor says it's normal." "General practitioners don't always catch everything," Victoria said, her tone suggesting she knew better than both my doctor and me. "Daniel's client Raymond, you remember him, honey, the neurologist? He said these things can sometimes indicate underlying issues." "I'm perfectly healthy," I insisted. "Mom, nobody's saying you're not," Daniel interjected. "We're just suggesting A second opinion. I stood up, suddenly needing to be anywhere but there. I think I should go. You just got here, Daniel protested, though without much conviction. I've brought the photo albums, I said, gesturing to my bag. And the scones if you change your mind about the gluten. I'll see myself out. Mom, don't be like that, Daniel said, following me to the door. I paused, hand on the doorknob. Like what, Daniel? Upset that I'm apparently too decrepit to hold my own granddaughter? That you and Victoria have discussions about my health behind my back? That you sit silently while she treats me like I'm incompetent? Daniel had the grace to look ashamed. That's not how it is. Isn't it? I asked. When was the last time you stood up for me? When was the last time you told Victoria that maybe, just maybe, I might know something about raising a child? Since I raised you? Margaret, Victoria called from behind him. We're only thinking of Emma. I looked past Daniel to where Victoria stood, arms crossed defensively. No, you're thinking of yourselves and what makes you comfortable. Emma was perfectly content in my arms. You're being emotional, Victoria said dismissively. That was when I saw it. The same expression I'd seen countless times on Gregory's face when he thought I was being difficult. That mixture of condescension and impatience, as if dealing with a troublesome child rather than an equal. Daniel had inherited that look, and now he was wearing it too. I'll see you next Thursday, I said flatly, and walked out. The drive. Home was a blur of hurt and anger. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were shaking worse than they had in months, proving Victoria's point in the most infuriating way possible. My craftsman bungalow welcomed me with its familiar comfort. The garden I'd cultivated over 30 years, the porch swing where I'd spent countless summer evenings, the stained glass panels in the front door that cast colorful patterns across the entryway floor on sunny days. This house held memories in every corner. Daniel taking his first steps by the fireplace, reading stories on the window seat, celebrating graduations and achievements around the dining table. But lately, it had started to feel too big, too full of echoes from a life that no longer existed. The life where I was respected as a mother, as a professional, as a person with valuable knowledge and experience. I made myself a cup of tea and carried it to my study, the one room that was entirely my own. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls filled with treasured volumes I'd collected over a lifetime. My desk faced the window that overlooked the garden, currently bright with early spring flowers. On the desk sat a folder labeled Emma's Trust. I'd established the fund shortly after learning Victoria was pregnant, setting aside a significant portion of my retirement savings and the money from selling Gregory's and my vacation property. After the divorce, the original plan had been simple: provide for Emma's education and give her a start in adult life, whatever path she chose. I opened the folder and reviewed the documents inside. The terms were generous but straightforward. Emma would receive funds for education expenses as needed, then access to the principal at age 25, by which time I hoped she'd have developed the maturity to use it wisely. Daniel and Victoria didn't know the full extent of the trust. They were aware it existed, but not the amount, close to $500,000, and growing steadily with careful investments. I'd planned to discuss the details with them on Emma's first birthday, to give them peace of mind about her future. But now, looking at the papers, a different idea began to form. The trust was in my name still, with Emma as the beneficiary. There were no legal obligations preventing me from changing the terms, or even the beneficiary. I closed the folder slowly. I wasn't vindictive by nature. Using Emma's future as leverage in what amounted to a power struggle with Victoria felt petty and wrong. And yet, the trust represented more than money. It represented my contribution to Emma's life, my voice in her future. If Victoria and Daniel were determined to minimize my role, perhaps they didn't need my financial support either. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Lily, it's Maggie. Are you free for coffee tomorrow? There's something I need to discuss. Lily Chen had been my closest friend since we'd both started working in Lakeside 35 years ago. She as an elementary school teacher, me as a librarian. She'd stood by me through Gregory's affair and the divorce, through Daniel's rebellious teenage years, through my mother's long illness and death. If anyone could offer perspective, it would be Lily. Of course, she answered. Is everything okay? You sound upset. I'll tell you tomorrow, I said. It's about Daniel and Victoria, and Emma. After hanging up, I sat for a long time, staring at the trust folder. The tremor in my hands had subsided, leaving behind a different kind of shaking, the kind that comes from a foundation being disturbed, from certainties giving way to questions. I'd spent my adult life being the reasonable one, the peacemaker, the one who bent to accommodate others' needs and expectations. First with Gregory, then with Daniel, and now with Victoria. Always adjusting, always compromising, always giving. But as I sat in my quiet study, surrounded by books that had been my companions and the garden I'd created with my own 2 hands, I wondered what would happen if, just this once, I didn't. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Sorry about today. Victoria's just anxious about doing everything right with Emma. See you Thursday? No mention of his own role in what had happened. No acknowledgement of how I might be feeling. Just another implicit request to understand, to forgive, to accommodate. I set the phone down without responding and turned instead to my computer. I opened my email and composed a message to Walter Hayes, the family lawyer who had handled my divorce and helped set up Emma's trust. Walter, I'd like to schedule an appointment to discuss making some changes to the Reynolds family trust. How is your availability next week? I paused, my finger hovering over the send button. This wasn't a decision to make in anger. I should sleep on it, talk to Lily, consider the long-term implications. But then I remembered Victoria's voice. At your age, it's important to pace yourself. Daniel's silence as she questioned my ability to hold my own granddaughter. The nursing pillow positioned like a barrier between Emma and me. I pressed send. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect spring day that usually lifted my spirits. I dressed carefully for my coffee meeting with Lily, choosing a cornflower blue blouse that she always said brought out my eyes, and my favorite silver earrings, small books with tiny reading glasses dangling from them, a retirement gift from my library colleagues. Waterfront Coffee was already busy when I arrived, the morning rush of professionals stopping for their daily fix, creating a lively hum of conversation. Have you mentioned that to your doctor? The question hung in the air, and I felt Daniel's attention finally shift from his phone to our conversation. It's just a mild familial tremor, I explained. Nothing concerning. My mother had the same. Thurs, Victoria exchanged a look with Daniel that sent a chill through me. They'd clearly discussed this before. We're just concerned about safety, Daniel said, finally speaking up. Babies can be squirmy and surprising in their movements. I raised you without dropping you once, I pointed out, unable to keep the edge from my voice. That was different. Times, Mom, Daniel said. We know so much more about infant development and safety now. I had a doctorate in library science and read every childcare book available, I reminded him. I wasn't operating on instinct alone. Victoria stood, still holding Emma close. Maybe we could compromise. What if you sit on the couch with the nursing pillow, and I'll place Emma there? That way, you can still have your time with her, but there's an extra layer of support. I wanted to argue but found myself nodding instead. Making a scene wouldn't help anyone, least of all Emma. I settled onto their pristine white sectional and allowed Victoria to arrange the crescent-shaped pillow on my lap. She placed Emma on it carefully, as if transferring a priceless artifact to an unreliable courier. There we go, Victoria said brightly, Much safer this way. Emma looked up at me, unaware of the negotiation that had just occurred for the privilege of holding her. I smiled down at her, drinking in her perfect little features. Daniel's nose, Victoria's blue eyes, and a determined little chin that reminded me of myself. "Hello, sweet girl," I whispered. "Grandma's here." For a few precious minutes, it was just Emma and me. I sang softly to her, an old lullaby my own mother had sung to me. Emma reached up with her tiny hand and grasped my finger, her grip surprisingly strong. These were the moments I lived for now. My reverie was broken by the sound of Victoria's phone chiming. She glanced at it and let out an exaggerated sigh. "The grocery delivery is coming early," she announced. "Daniel, can you help me check the order when it arrives? Last time they substituted regular milk for organic." "Sure thing," Daniel said, standing immediately. "We'll just be a few minutes, Margaret," Victoria added. "You're okay with Emma there? Don't try to get up with her, though. Just call if she gets fussy." Before I could answer, they were both gone, leaving me alone with my granddaughter. If they were truly concerned about my ability to care for Emma, would they have left so quickly? Or was the tremor just a convenient excuse? I looked down at my hands, now perfectly steady as they cradled Emma's tiny body. The tremor tended to come and go, usually worse when I was tired or stressed. Like now, when I felt judged and diminished. "They mean well," I told Emma softly. "Your mommy and daddy just want to keep you safe. But Grandma knows what she's doing." "Yes, she does." I heard Victoria's voice from the front door, thanking the delivery person. Then came the sound of bags being set down, followed by Daniel and Victoria's voices, too low to make out the words. They were taking their time, probably enjoying a moment without my presence. Carefully, I lifted Emma from the nursing pillow and held her properly against my chest, supporting her head and bottom as I'd done countless times with Daniel. She nuzzled against me, her warm weight and baby scent bringing tears to my eyes. This was what I'd looked forward to all week. I began to rock gently, humming the lullaby again. Emma's eyelids grew heavy, and I felt the exact moment she drifted off to sleep, her small body relaxing completely against mine. The sound of approaching footsteps made me tense. I considered quickly returning Emma to the pillow arrangement, but decided against it. I wasn't doing anything wrong or dangerous. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her expression shifting from neutral to alarmed in an instant. "Margaret, what are you doing?" she hissed, rushing forward. "I specifically asked you to keep her on the pillow." "She's fine," I said quietly, trying not to disturb Emma. "She just fell asleep." "That's not the point," Victoria said, her voice tight. "We had an agreement." Daniel appeared behind her, his face apologetic but his eyes avoiding mine. "Mom, please, we talked about this." "No, you talked. I listened," I replied, still keeping my voice low. "And now Emma is sleeping peacefully. Isn't that what matters?" Victoria reached for Emma. "I'll take her now." I reluctantly allowed her to lift Emma from my arms, feeling the loss immediately. The baby stirred, her face scrunching in displeasure at being moved. "She was settled," I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "She needs to be in her crib for proper sleep," Victoria insisted, already heading toward the hallway. "Babies need consistent routines." I looked to Daniel, hoping for support, but he just shrugged helplessly. "She's read all the books, Mom." "So did I said. 3 decades ago, and again when I knew I was going to be a grandmother." Daniel sat beside me on the couch, patting my hand in a way that felt condescending. "Victoria just has strong feelings about how we're raising Emma. You know how it is. Every generation has its own parenting style. This isn't about parenting styles," I said. "This is about Victoria not trusting me with my own granddaughter." Daniel sighed. "Mom, that's not fair. Victoria is just protective, I know," I finished for him. But Daniel, at what point does protective become controlling? You used to fall asleep on my chest every night. It was the only way you'd sleep through the night as a baby. Things are different now, he said, the default response whenever I referenced my own experience as a mother. The pediatric guidelines have changed? Victoria returned without Emma, her expression composed again. She's down in her crib. The monitor is on. She settled into an armchair across from us. Margaret, I hope you understand that our concerns come from a place of love. Emma's safety is our top priority. Of course it is, I said. It's mine too. Lily was waiting at our usual table by the window, 2 steaming mugs already in front of her. I ordered your usual, she said as I sat down. Earl Grey with a splash of milk. You're a lifesaver, I said, warming my hands around the mug. Lily studied my face. At 63, she had the same keen observation skills that had made her an excellent teacher. Her short silver hair was styled in a modern pixie cut that framed her round face, and her dark eyes missed nothing. So, she said, what happened with Daniel and Victoria this time? I took a deep breath and recounted yesterday's events to Lily, my voice catching as I described Victoria's comments about my tremor and the humiliating nursing pillow arrangement. The coffee shop buzzed around us, but Lily remained focused, entirely on me, her expression shifting between sympathy and indignation. And then I emailed Walter about changing the trust, I concluded, staring down at my now cold tea. I was so angry, Lily, I still am. Lily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You have every right to be upset. That was incredibly condescending of Victoria, and Daniel should have stood up for you. He never does, I said quietly. Not since he married her. It's like he's forgotten who raised him. Men often side with their wives over their mothers, Lily said. But this goes beyond taking sides. This is about basic respect. I nodded, grateful for her understanding. I keep wondering if I'm overreacting. After all, they're just trying to keep Emma safe. Maggie, Lily said firmly, there's being cautious, and then there's being controlling. Victoria isn't just protecting Emma. She's establishing dominance. She's making sure you know your place in the hierarchy. The bluntness of her assessment stung, but I couldn't deny the truth in it. So, what do I do? Change the trust out of spite? That feels petty. Lily considered this, stirring her cappuccino thoughtfully. It's your money, and you have every right to decide how it's used. But before you make any permanent decisions, what exactly do you want to happen here? I paused, sorting through my jumbled emotions. I want to be respected. I want to be acknowledged as someone who has valuable experience and knowledge. I want a meaningful relationship with my granddaughter. Then changing the trust might not be the answer, Lily said gently. At least not yet. It might feel satisfying in the moment, but it won't solve the real problem. So I just keep letting them treat me like I'm incompetent? The frustration in my voice was evident. No, Lily said, her eyes suddenly bright with an idea. You show them they're wrong. You prove your capability in ways they can't dismiss. How? Remember when the library board tried to force your early retirement? They claimed you couldn't keep up with the digital transformation. I smiled at the memory. And I learned every new system, created the digital literacy program, and ended up training the board members themselves. Exactly, Lily said. You didn't argue or get defensive. You demonstrated your value so convincingly they couldn't ignore it. The wheels began turning in my mind. So instead of changing the trust now, I use it as leverage later, after I've proven myself? I wouldn't even frame it that way in your mind, Lily cautioned. This isn't about manipulation or revenge. It's about establishing boundaries and commanding respect. We talked for another hour, our conversation shifting from strategy to broader reflections on aging, family dynamics, and the invisibility that sometimes comes with growing older as a woman. By the time we left Waterfront Coffee, I had the beginnings of a plan forming. Not a dramatic confrontation, but a quieter, more deliberate approach. Later that afternoon, I kept my appointment with Dr. Rivera for my regular checkup. After the standard examination, I brought up the hand tremor directly. "Victoria noticed it's gotten worse," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "She's concerned it might indicate something serious." Dr. Rivera, a woman in her 50s with a pragmatic manner I'd always appreciated, had me hold out my hands and perform a series of movements. "The tremor is slightly more pronounced than at your last visit," she acknowledged. "But there's nothing in your other tests indicating a neurological issue. It's most likely essential tremor, which is common and typically benign." "Is there anything I can do about it?" I asked. "There are medications if it's interfering with daily activities," she said, "and some lifestyle adjustments can help, reducing caffeine, getting enough sleep, managing stress. Speaking of which, your blood pressure is elevated today." I laughed, without humor. That might have something to do with my daughter-in-law suggesting I'm too shaky to hold my granddaughter. Dr. Rivera's expression softened with understanding. "Family stress can affect physical symptoms significantly. Would you like me to write up a medical assessment of your condition? Something official stating that your tremor doesn't impact your ability to safely handle an infant?" The offer touched me deeply. "Would you? That might help." She nodded, already making notes in my file. "I'll also refer you to Dr. Chen, no relation to your friend Lily, I believe, for a specialist consultation. Not because I think there's anything seriously wrong, but because having a neurologist's assessment will give additional weight to what I'm already confident about, that you're perfectly capable of caring for your granddaughter." I left the clinic with the doctor's note and referral in hand, feeling vindicated but also somewhat sad that I needed medical documentation to be trusted with my own grandchild. Still, it was a start. The next morning, I drove to Hayes and Morrow, the law office downtown where Walter had practiced for over 30 years. The building was an elegant converted Victorian, its interior modernized while preserving the original architectural details. Walter's office overlooked the park, and he greeted me with the same warm handshake he'd offered when I'd first consulted him about my divorce 15 years earlier. "Maggie, good to see you," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "I was surprised by your email. I thought we had the trust set up exactly as you wanted." "We did," I confirmed, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. "But circumstances change." Walter nodded, his expression neutral and professional. At 59, with silver-streaked dark hair and reading glasses perched on his nose, he projected exactly the right blend of authority and approachability that had made him Lakeside's most sought-after family lawyer. "What changes did you have in mind?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "First, I'd like to understand all my options. The trust is currently set up with Emma as the sole beneficiary, correct? With funds accessible for education and then the principal at 25. "That's correct," Walter confirmed. "It's a fairly standard arrangement for a grandchild's trust. And I retain control of the trust until my death, at which point it converts to an irrevocable trust with the terms we've established." Walter nodded. "You're the trustee, with full authority to make changes to the terms or even the beneficiary. During your lifetime." I leaned forward slightly. "That's what I want to explore today. Not making immediate changes, but understanding my options if I decide to adjust the trust in the future." Walter studied me for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "This wouldn't have anything to do with Daniel and Victoria, would it?" I hesitated, then decided on honesty. Walter had been with me through the worst of my divorce. He understood family complications better than most. There have been some tensions. They're increasingly treating me as if I'm on the verge of incompetence. I'm being sidelined in Emma's life in ways that concern me. Walter removed his glasses, polishing them with a cloth from his desk drawer, a habit I'd noticed. He used to give himself time to think. Maggie, I've known you for many years. Incompetent is not a word anyone with sense would associate with you. But I have to caution you against making financial decisions based on emotional reactions to family conflicts. I'm not planning to disinherit my granddaughter out of spite, I clarified. I just want to understand my options, particularly regarding how the trust might be structured to ensure my voice and values remain part of Emma's life, even if her parents are determined to minimize my role. Walter nodded slowly. There are several approaches we could consider. Educational trusts with specific conditions, staged distributions based on age or achievements, charitable components that reflect your values, even trust provisions that encourage certain types of experiences or growth. For the next hour, we discussed various trust structures and conditions. Walter was thorough in explaining the legal implications of each option, occasionally sharing anecdotes from his practice about how different arrangements had played out in other families. By the end of our meeting, I had a much clearer understanding of my options without having committed to any specific changes. I'll have my assistant prepare some sample documents for you to review, Walter said as we concluded. No changes will be filed until you give explicit approval. Take your time to consider the implications of any adjustments. I stood to leave, feeling more centered than I had since yesterday's confrontation with Victoria. Thank you, Walter. This has been immensely helpful. He walked me to the door, then paused. Maggie, may I offer some personal advice, as someone who's seen many family conflicts play out over the years? Of course. Money is a powerful tool, but it rarely solves relationship problems. In fact, it often complicates them. Whatever issues exist between you, Daniel, and Victoria, they won't be resolved through financial maneuvering alone. I nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in his words. I know, but sometimes having options restores a sense of agency when you're feeling powerless. Fair enough, he said with a small smile. Just remember that the ultimate goal isn't winning a power struggle. It's ensuring your relationship with Emma and her parents remains intact and meaningful. I left Walter's office and walked through Lakeview Park, allowing the spring sunshine and the sight of children playing to lift my spirits. Walter was right that money wouldn't solve the underlying issues, but knowing I had options made me feel less like a victim and more like someone with choices and power. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Mom, are you okay? You didn't respond to my message yesterday. I sat on a park bench, considering my response carefully. Part of me wanted to be honest about how hurt I'd been, but I knew from experience that direct confrontation often led to defensiveness rather than understanding. After several drafted and deleted messages, I settled on. I'm fine. Just needed some time to think. See you Thursday as usual. His response came quickly. Victoria says she's sorry if she upset you. She's just protective of Emma. Not a direct apology from Victoria, I noted, and still no acknowledgement of his own role in the situation. I decided not to respond further. Actions would speak louder than words in the days ahead. That afternoon, I visited Turning Pages, the small independent bookshop downtown where I'd been a regular customer for decades. The owner, Martha, greeted me warmly as I browsed the children's section. Looking for something for Emma? She asked, familiar with my regular purchases for my granddaughter. Yes, but also something else, I said. Are you still looking for part-time help? I remember you mentioned it when I was in last month. Martha's eyebrows rose in surprise. I am, actually. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, plus occasional Saturdays. Are you interested? I nodded. I've been thinking about getting back into the book world just a few hours a week. The community center work is fulfilling, but I miss being surrounded by books and readers. Maggie, you'd be perfect, Martha exclaimed. Your knowledge of literature would be invaluable. and so many of our customers already know you from your years at the library." We discussed the details, and I left with both a new picture book for Emma and a promise to start the following Tuesday. The decision hadn't been part of my original plan for the day, but it felt right. The bookshop position would give me a new focus, additional income of my own, and most importantly, a reminder to myself and others that I was still capable, knowledgeable, and valuable. The rest of the week passed in a flurry of activity. I received Dr. Rivera's detailed medical assessment, confirming that my essential tremor was mild and posed no safety concerns for handling an infant. I scheduled an appointment with the neurologist for the following month, more as a precaution than out of concern. I also called Eleanor, my older sister who lived in Oregon, to get her perspective on the situation. Eleanor had always been straightforward to the point of bluntness, which was exactly what I needed. "Victoria sounds like a control freak," she declared after hearing my account. "And Daniel needs to grow a backbone. But Maggie, you need to be strategic here. Don't let them push you into decisions you'll regret." "I'm trying," I assured her. "I'm gathering information, getting medical documentation, even taking a part-time job at the bookshop." "Good," Eleanor said approvingly. "Show them you're not just sitting around waiting for your weekly visit with Emma. Build your own life that they have to respect." By Thursday morning, I felt prepared for my regular visit to Daniel and Victoria's house. I dressed carefully, in a new outfit I'd purchased, a structured coral blazer over a crisp white blouse paired with well-fitting navy trousers. Professional, stylish, confident. I packed Dr. Rivera's letter in my bag, along with the new picture book for Emma and a box of specialty teas for Victoria, a peace offering of sorts. When I arrived at the house, I was surprised to find Daniel's car still in the driveway. He usually left for work by 9, and it was now after 10. I knocked rather than using my key, deciding that respecting their space might help set a new tone. Victoria opened the door, Emma on her hip. She looked momentarily startled by my appearance, perhaps by the new outfit, or perhaps by the fact that I was knocking instead of walking in. "Margaret," she said, her tone cautious. "Come in." Daniel was in the living room, laptop open on the coffee table. "Morning, Mom," he said, getting up to greet me. "I'm working from home today. Thought it might be nice for all of us to spend some time together." I wondered if this was his attempt at mediation after last week's tension. If so, I appreciated the effort, even if it felt somewhat calculating. "That's lovely," I said, keeping my voice light. "I've brought something for Emma and some tea I thought you might enjoy, Victoria." Victoria accepted the tea with a surprised "thank you" that seemed genuine. Daniel took Emma from her arms and, to my surprise, immediately offered her to me. "Would you like to hold her?" he asked, his tone deliberately casual. "I'd love to," I replied, setting my bag down and reaching for Emma. I noted that Victoria tensed slightly, but didn't object as Daniel placed Emma in my arms. My hands were perfectly steady as I cradled my granddaughter, smiling down at her familiar face. She had grown even in the week since I'd last seen her, more alert and responsive than before. "She missed her grandma," Daniel said, and though the sentiment seemed forced, I appreciated the attempt. We settled in the living room, with me securely holding Emma while Victoria prepared the tea I'd brought. The conversation was stilted at first, carefully avoiding any reference to last week's confrontation. Daniel talked about a new client at his financial advising firm, and I shared news about the community center's latest grant. After about 20 minutes, Emma began to fuss. Victoria immediately reached for her, but I spoke first. "I think she might be getting hungry. Would you like me to feed her if you have a bottle ready?" Victoria hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "There's one in the warmer. I'll get it." While she was in the kitchen, Daniel turned to me. "Mom, about last week." "It's all right," I interrupted gently. "I know you both want what's best for Emma." We do, he said, looking relieved at avoiding a deeper conversation. And Victoria really is sorry if she came across as, well, controlling. I understand, I said, deciding that pushing for a more substantive acknowledgement wouldn't serve my purposes today. By the way, I saw Dr. Rivera for my regular checkup this week. She said the tremor is just essential tremor, nothing neurological to worry about. I didn't mention the letter. In my bag. I wanted to see if this softer approach might work before presenting medical documentation that could feel confrontational. That's good to hear, Daniel said, visibly relaxing. Victoria returned with the bottle, and to my delight, handed it directly to me instead of insisting on taking Emma back. Here you go, she said. She usually takes about 4 ounces at this time of day. Thank you, I replied, adjusting Emma in my arms and offering her the bottle. She latched on immediately, her blue eyes fixed on my face as she drank. The simple act of feeding my granddaughter felt like a victory, small, but significant. I've been meaning to tell you, I said conversationally as Emma drank. I've taken a part-time position at Turning Pages, just a few mornings a week. Daniel looked surprised. The bookshop? Why would you do that? You don't need the money. It's not about money, I explained. It's about staying engaged with books and readers. Martha needs someone with knowledge of literature, and I miss being in that environment. Victoria seemed genuinely interested. That sounds lovely, actually. I always liked that store. They have the best selection of design books in town. The conversation shifted to books we'd recently read, a neutral topic that nevertheless allowed for genuine connection. As Victoria described a novel her book club had selected, I saw glimpses of the intelligent, passionate woman Daniel had fallen in love with, rather than the controlling figure she'd become in my mind. When Emma finished her bottle, I expertly burped her, then continued holding her as we talked. My hands remained steady, my confidence growing with each minute that passed without comment or criticism from Victoria. Eventually, Emma dozed off, in my arms, her tiny face peaceful in sleep. Would you like me to put her down for her nap? I offered. Victoria seemed to struggle internally for a moment, then nodded. Sure, the nursery is all set up. I carried Emma carefully up the stairs to her nursery, a beautifully decorated room in soft greens and yellows. I laid her gently in the crib, tucking a light blanket around her lower body as I'd always done with Daniel. Standing for a moment, watching her sleep, I felt a profound sense of connection and purpose. When I returned downstairs, Victoria was showing Daniel something on her phone, both of them looking concerned. They quickly straightened up when they saw me. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, Daniel said too quickly. Emma go down easily? Like an angel, I confirmed, choosing to ignore whatever tension I'd interrupted. She's sleeping soundly. Victoria checked the baby monitor, and I could see her visibly relax when she confirmed Emma was indeed sleeping peacefully. Thank you, Margaret. The rest of the visit passed pleasantly enough. We discussed plans for Emma's upcoming baptism, with Victoria surprising me by asking if I'd like to select the readings for the service. You know religious literature better than anyone in the family, she said, which I took as both a compliment and an olive branch. When it was time for me to leave, Daniel walked me to the door while Victoria took a work call in the kitchen. This was nice, Mom, he said. Much better than last week. Yes, I agreed. It was. So we're good? He asked, clearly hoping for easy resolution. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, who still in many ways remained a mystery to me. We're working on it, I said honestly. I want a good relationship with you and Victoria, and most of all, I want to be a meaningful part of Emma's life. He nodded, looking relieved. That's what we want too. I hope so, I said, reaching for my bag. Oh, I almost forgot. I saw Dr. Rivera this week about the tremor. She wrote a letter confirming it's just essential tremor and doesn't affect my ability to care for Emma safely. I brought it in case you or Victoria wanted to see it. I handed him the envelope, and something flickered across his face. Embarrassment, perhaps, or shame that such documentation had been necessary. "Mom, you didn't need to do this," he said, not opening the letter. "I wanted to," I replied, "for Emma's sake, and for peace of mind all around." He slipped the letter into his pocket with a nod. "I appreciate it, and I'm sorry if we made you feel less than capable." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of how deeply they'd hurt me, but it was something, a beginning. As I drove home, I reflected on the visit. The dynamics had shifted slightly, not dramatically, but perceptibly. My calmer approach, combined with Victoria's apparent attempt to be less controlling, had created space for a more respectful interaction. But I was under no illusion that one pleasant visit had resolved the underlying issues. When I got home, I found an email from Walter with the sample trust documents he'd promised. I saved them to review later, not wanting to make any decisions. While still processing the morning's interactions, the trust funds remained my insurance policy, a source of power I could leverage if necessary, but not a weapon to be deployed hastily. Instead, I turned my attention to preparing for my first day at Turning Pages the following Tuesday. I created a reading list of recommendations for various age groups, updated my knowledge of current bestsellers and literary awards, and planned an outfit that would be both practical for shelving books and professional enough to convey authority. The weekend passed quietly. I spent Saturday morning tending to my garden, finding peace in the simple physical work of preparing the soil for summer planting. In the afternoon, I visited the community center to help with the final arrangements for the new children's reading corner. The director, Marcus, was thrilled with the colorful bookshelves and comfortable floor cushions we'd selected. "This is going to make such a difference for our after-school program," he said as we arranged the space. "Having a dedicated reading area will encourage the kids to see books as something special, not just educational." "That was always my philosophy at the library," I agreed. "Reading should feel like a privilege, not a chore." Marcus looked at me thoughtfully. "You know, Maggie, we're expanding our summer programming this year. Would you consider taking on a more formal role? Perhaps coordinating the reading program, as we discussed earlier? The grant came through, so we could offer a modest stipend." The offer was tempting. Between this and the bookshop position, I would have a structured schedule that highlighted my abilities and expertise, tangible evidence of my continued competence and value. "I'd be honored," I told him. "Let me check my calendar and make sure I can commit the necessary time." Sunday morning, I attended the early service at Lakeside Community Church, where I'd been a member for decades. Afterward, during the coffee hour, I found myself surrounded by friends and acquaintances asking about Emma and offering updates on their own grandchildren. These conversations, once a source of simple joy, now carried a slight edge of discomfort as I carefully edited my responses to avoid revealing the tensions with Daniel and Victoria. Judith Morgan, whose late husband had served on the library, bored with me, pulled me aside. "Maggie, are you all right? You seem preoccupied." I hesitated, then decided on honesty with this woman who had known me for over 30 years. "Just some family challenges. Daniel and Victoria are, let's say, they're very particular about how involved I should be with Emma." Judith nodded with immediate understanding. "Ah, the modern parent dilemma. My daughter Rebecca barely let me hold my grandson until he was walking. Now she begs me to babysit every weekend." "How did you handle it?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Patience and selective memory loss," Judith said with a wink. "I conveniently forgot all their rules when they weren't looking, but never let them catch me. And I kept myself busy enough that when they did need help, I wasn't sitting by the phone desperate for their call." "That's essentially what I'm trying now," I admitted, "taking on new responsibilities, building my own life." "It works," Judith assured me. Nothing makes you more attractive to busy parents than being too occupied to be at their beck and call. Suddenly, they remember all the free childcare they're missing out on. We laughed together, and for the first time in days, I felt genuinely lightened. The situation with Daniel and Victoria wasn't unique to me. It was a common dynamic that many grandparents navigated successfully. That knowledge didn't eliminate the hurt, but it did provide perspective and hope. Sunday evening, I finally opened Walter's email and reviewed the trust documents he'd prepared. He'd outlined 3 possible approaches: keeping the current structure but adding more specific educational provisions, converting to a staged distribution model with milestones beyond just age requirements, or creating a more complex arrangement that included both family and charitable components. Each option had its merits, and none required immediate decision. I saved the documents to a folder labeled Emma's Future and closed my laptop, feeling a sense of calm control that had eluded me since the confrontation with Victoria. Monday morning, I received a text from Daniel with a photo of Emma smiling. In her high chair, fruit puree smeared across her face. Having breakfast with Dad while Mom's at an early meeting. Thought Grandma would want to see the mess. The casual message and charming photo warmed my heart. It felt like a small but significant olive branch, an acknowledgement of my place in Emma's life, offered freely rather than grudgingly. I responded with a heart emoji and, "She gets messier every time I see her. Save some bananas for Thursday." That afternoon, I had tea with Lily again, updating her on the developments of the past few days. She listened attentively, nodding at my account of the more positive visit with Daniel and Victoria. "So you've decided not to change the trust, for now?" she asked after I'd finished. "I'm keeping my options open," I explained. "Walter prepared some alternative structures I could implement if necessary, but there's no rush to decide. For now, I'm focusing on demonstrating my capability through actions rather than assertions." "Wise approach," Lily approved. "Taking the high road while maintaining your boundaries." "I'm also thinking of looking into some classes," I added. "The community college has a digital photography course I've always been interested in. And there's a memoir writing workshop at the senior center that sounds intriguing." "Perfect," Lily said enthusiastically. "Build a life so full and interesting that they have to see you as the vibrant, capable woman you are, not just Daniel's mother or Emma's grandmother." As I drove home from our meeting, I reflected on the shift in my thinking over the past 5 days. What had begun as hurt and anger had evolved into something more measured and strategic. Not a rash rebellion, but a quiet reclamation of my identity and agency. The trust fund remained a significant piece of my leverage, but it was no longer the only tool at my disposal. That evening, I sat in my garden as the sun set, watching the western sky turn from gold to pink to deepening blue. The day-lily beds I'd planted years ago were beginning to show their first green shoots, promising a summer of vibrant blooms. Like those perennials, I too was emerging from a dormant period, pushing through the soil of complacency and resignation toward something new and colorful. I hadn't yet decided exactly what changes, if any, I would make to Emma's trust. But I had made a more important decision. I would no longer allow myself to be diminished or sidelined. Whether Daniel and Victoria fully recognized it yet or not, a transformation had begun. The woman who would greet them on Thursday would not be the same one who had left their house in tears the week before. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Neurologist Aptai, confirm. I had almost forgotten the specialist appointment Dr. Rivera had arranged. I confirmed the time, then added another event immediately after it. Lunch with Sophia Patel. The financial advisor Walter had recommended was available to discuss investment strategies for the trust, regardless of what structure I ultimately chose. Knowledge, like money, was power, and I intended to arm myself with both. Tuesday morning arrived with a gentle rain tapping against my bedroom window, the kind of spring shower that makes the world smell clean and new. I dressed with care for my first day at Turning Pages, selecting a comfortable but professional outfit. Dark jeans, a soft blue cardigan over a white blouse, and comfortable flats that would allow me to stand for extended periods. I added my book-shaped earrings and pinned my silver hair into a neat twist at the nape of my neck. The bookshop was already busy when I arrived at 9. Martha greeted me warmly, then spent the next hour walking me through the inventory system, register, procedures, and daily routines. Though much had changed since my library days, digital inventory tracking instead of card catalogs, e-readers alongside physical books, the essence remained the same: connecting people with stories that would inform, entertain, and transform them. The morning crowd is mostly retirees and mothers with young children, Martha explained as she showed me the children's section. Lunchtime brings the professionals from downtown offices, and after-school hours fill with teenagers looking for the latest young adult titles. I nodded, already mentally cataloging the types of recommendations I might offer each group. And you mentioned you've been wanting to start a children's storytime program? Martha's face lit up. Yes. I've had so many requests, but I've never been comfortable performing readings myself. With your background, I thought perhaps. I'd be happy to, I said, already envisioning how I might structure the sessions. Perhaps Saturday mornings? We could start with a trial run next weekend and see what the response is like. Perfect, Martha agreed. I'll put up signs and post it on our social media accounts. The morning passed quickly as I settled into the work. I helped an elderly gentleman find a biography of Churchill, guided a harried-looking young mother to the best picture books for a toddler obsessed with trucks, and organized a new display for the upcoming summer reading season. The familiar rhythm of literary work filled me with quiet satisfaction. During a lull around 11, Martha joined me at the register. You're a natural, Maggie. The customers love you already. It feels good to be back among books, I admitted, and to feel useful. Speaking of useful, Martha said, lowering her voice slightly, Victoria Reynolds was just on the phone ordering a book. When I mentioned you'd started working here, she seemed surprised. I kept my expression neutral. Oh? She asked quite a few questions about your schedule, whether you were just filling in temporarily or if it was a regular position. I hope I didn't overstep by telling her you'd be here Tuesday and Thursday mornings, plus occasional Saturdays. Not at all, I assured her, curious about Victoria's interest. She's my daughter-in-law. Ah, that explains it, Martha said. She's ordered parenting books from us before, very precise about what she wants. I smiled at the apt description of Victoria's approach to motherhood. Yes, that sounds like her. The conversation shifted to upcoming book shipments, but I found myself wondering about Victoria's reaction to my new job. Was she merely surprised, or was there something more to her interest in my schedule? I hadn't mentioned the exact days. I'd be working when I told them about the position last week. After my shift ended at 1, I stopped by the community center to sign the paperwork for the summer reading program coordinator position. Marcus was delighted when I confirmed my acceptance, immediately outlining his vision for an expanded program that would serve more children than in previous years. We need to reach the kids who aren't already regular readers, he emphasized, the ones who might not have books at home or parents with time to read to them. I couldn't agree more, I said, thinking of the many children I'd seen transform through literacy programs during my library career. Perhaps we could arrange transportation from some of the underserved neighborhoods? We spent an hour brainstorming ideas, my excitement growing with each possibility we discussed. This was meaningful work that played to my strengths and experience. A perfect complement to the bookshop position and my existing volunteer activities. As I left the community center, my phone rang. The screen showed Daniel calling, an unexpected midweek contact. Hello? I answered. Hi, Mom, he said, his voice carrying that slightly forced cheerfulness that usually meant he wanted something. How are you? I'm well, I replied. Just finished my first shift at the bookshop, actually. It went very nicely. Right, the bookshop, he said. Victoria mentioned you're working there now? Tuesday and Thursday mornings? I felt a flicker of irritation at his tone, which suggested he found this development puzzling rather than impressive. That's right, and I've just accepted the summer reading program coordinator position at the community center. It's a part-time paid role. Wow, you're keeping busy, he said, sounding genuinely surprised. I thought retirement meant slowing down, not taking on more work. Retirement means I finally get to choose how I spend my time, I corrected gently. These aren't obligations. They're opportunities I'm excited about. Fair enough, he conceded. Listen, the reason I'm calling. Victoria has a last-minute client meeting tomorrow morning, and I have a presentation I can't reschedule. We're in a bind with Emma. Our regular sitter is on vacation this week. Any chance you could help out, just for a few hours? The request took me by surprise. After Victoria's concerns about my tremor and their reluctance to let me hold Emma without the nursing pillow, they now wanted me to babysit? I was tempted to point out the contradiction, but decided a more strategic response would serve my purposes better. I'd love to help, I said, keeping my tone light. What time do you need me? Daniel sounded relieved. Could you come by around 8? Victoria needs to leave by 8:30 and I've got to be downtown by 9. I'll be there, I promised. Great. Victoria's leaving written instructions for Emma's morning routine. She's getting more active now, so you'll need to keep a close eye on her. I bit back a comment about having successfully raised an active baby before. I'm sure we'll be fine. Emma and I will have a wonderful morning together. After ending the call, I sat in my car for a moment, processing this unexpected development. Being asked to babysit was a significant vote of confidence, even if it came from necessity rather than a genuine change of heart. Still, it was an opportunity to demonstrate my competence in a way that couldn't be dismissed. I stopped at the grocery store on my way home, picking up ingredients for a batch of homemade applesauce, one of the few solid foods Emma was eating regularly, according to Daniel. I also purchased a small stuffed owl for Emma, remembering how Daniel had been fascinated by similar textures as a baby. At home, I spent the evening preparing for my babysitting duties. I made the applesauce, carefully cooking the apples with a touch of cinnamon until they reached the perfect consistency. I set out clothes for the morning that would be comfortable for chasing after a mobile infant, but still presentable enough to convey the image I wanted Victoria and Daniel to see. A capable grandmother, not a doddering old woman. I also reviewed Walter's trust documents again, considering how this new development might influence my decisions. If Victoria and Daniel were beginning to trust me with Emma's care, perhaps the more drastic changes to the trust wouldn't be necessary. But I wasn't ready to abandon the options Walter had outlined either. This babysitting opportunity was promising, but one morning wouldn't erase months of undermining and disrespect. The next morning, I arrived at Daniel and Victoria's house, precisely at 8, carrying a small insulated bag with the homemade applesauce and the gift-wrapped stuffed owl. Victoria answered the door, already dressed in a sleek business suit, her expression a mixture of relief and anxiety. "Margaret, thank you for coming on such short notice," she said, ushering me inside. "Emma's just finishing breakfast with Daniel. I've written everything down on the kitchen counter. Her schedule, emergency contacts, what she can eat, what she can't." I nodded, setting my bag down. "I'm sure we'll be fine. I raised a baby before, remember?" I kept my tone light, a gentle reminder rather than a rebuke. Victoria had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Of course. It's just that every baby is different, and Emma has her particular needs." "I understand," I said. "I'll follow your instructions carefully." Daniel appeared with Emma in his arms, the baby's face brightening when she saw me. "Look." "Who's here, Emma? It's Grandma Maggie." Emma reached out her little arms toward me, and Daniel transferred her to my steady embrace without hesitation. I savored the weight of her in my arms, the trust in her eyes as she patted my face with sticky fingers. "She's just had some yogurt," Daniel explained. "Might need a quick cleanup before I leave." Victoria hovered nearby, clearly struggling with the idea of leaving Emma, even with her grandmother. I've set out her toys in the playpen, and there are extra clothes in the nursery if she needs a change. She usually naps around 10:30, but she might be too excited with you here. "Ugh, we'll find our rhythm," I assured her. "Don't worry about us. Focus on your meeting." Victoria checked her watch, then reluctantly picked up her briefcase. "I'll try to wrap up by noon, but I'll text if I'm running late." "Take your time," I said. "Emma and I have plenty to do." Daniel kissed Emma's forehead, then mine. "Thanks again, Mom. This is a huge help." After they both left, the house fell into a peaceful quiet, broken only by Emma's happy babbling as she played with my necklace. I carried her to the kitchen, settling her into her high chair while I reviewed Victoria's extensive notes, 3 pages of detailed instructions, color-coded and indexed like a military operation. "Your mother doesn't leave much to chance, does she?" I said to Emma, who responded with a delighted squeal. "But that's okay. We all love in different ways." Once I'd familiarized myself with Victoria's instructions, I cleaned Emma's face and hands, then brought her into the living room where the elaborate playpen was set up. Unlike the simple playpens of Daniel's era, this was an expansive, padded enclosure filled with educational toys, each one apparently designed to stimulate some specific developmental milestone. I placed Emma inside, then sat on the floor next to the playpen, watching as she crawled energetically from toy to toy. Her determination reminded me of Daniel at the same age, focused and persistent, even when a toy proved challenging. After about 20 minutes, Emma began to fuss, clearly bored with the confines of the playpen. According to Victoria's schedule, this was tummy time on the special padded mat, following a specific sequence of guided activities. Instead, I lifted Emma out of the playpen and carried her to the large picture window overlooking the backyard. "Look, Emma," I said, pointing to a robin building a nest in the maple tree. "See the bird? She's making a home for her babies." Emma watched, fascinated, as the robin flew back and forth with twigs and grass. When the bird disappeared, I carried Emma to the bookshelf, selecting one of the tactile books Victoria had neatly arranged. We settled on the couch, Emma in my lap, as I read the simple story, guiding her little fingers over the different textures on each page. The morning passed in a pleasant rhythm of reading, playing, and exploring. I followed most of Victoria's schedule: diaper changes, snack time, more play, but allowed the activities to flow naturally rather than adhering to strict timeframes. Emma seemed to thrive with this flexible approach, her curiosity blossoming as we discovered the world together. At 10:15, I brought out the homemade applesauce, offering Emma a small spoonful. She hesitated initially, then opened her mouth eagerly, clearly enjoying the subtle cinnamon flavor. By the time she finished, more applesauce decorated her face and bib than had probably made it into her stomach, but her delighted expression made the mess worthwhile. After cleaning her up, I noticed she was beginning to rub her eyes, the universal baby signal for fatigue. Though it was earlier than her scheduled nap time, I decided to follow her cues rather than Victoria's timetable. I carried her upstairs to the nursery, settling into the rocking chair with Emma cradled against my chest. Humming softly, I rocked her gently, feeling her little body gradually relax as sleep overtook her. Unlike Victoria's detailed nap protocol, which involved a specific white noise machine, blackout curtains, and a precise room temperature, I relied on the age-old comfort of a grandmother's embrace and the soothing rhythm of the rocking chair. Once Emma was deeply asleep, I carefully transferred her to the crib, covering her with the light blanket as instructed. I stood watching her for a moment, marveling at the miracle of this small person who carried both my genes and my heart with her into the world. Back downstairs, I used the quiet time to straighten up the living room, washing the applesauce dishes and returning toys to their designated spots. Victoria's house was immaculate, everything in its proper place, a stark contrast to my own more lived-in home with its comfortable clutter of books and mementos. I was just folding the last of the baby blankets when I heard a key in the front door. To my surprise, it wasn't Victoria returning early, but Daniel, his expression harried as he stepped inside. "Mom, everything okay?" he asked, setting his briefcase down. "Where's Emma?" "She went down for her nap a bit early," I explained. "She was rubbing her eyes, so I followed her cues rather than the schedule." Daniel looked momentarily concerned. "Victoria's pretty strict about the nap schedule. She says it helps with Emma's sleep patterns." "Babies have their own internal clocks," I said gently. "Sometimes flexibility serves them better than rigidity." He sighed, loosening his tie. "Maybe you're right." The presentation ended sooner than expected, so I thought I'd check in before heading back to the office. Victoria texted that her meeting is running long. "Emma and I have had a lovely morning," I assured him. "She ate well, played happily, and went down for her nap without a fuss." Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly. "That's great. She can be challenging for sitters sometimes." He glanced around the tidy living room. "Wow, you even cleaned up. You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," I said. "It gave me something to do while she sleeps." Daniel moved to the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. I followed, leaning against the counter as he drank. "So," he said after a moment, "this new job at the bookstore. Is it because you need money?" "Because if it is, you know Victoria and I would be happy to help." The question stung, reinforcing his perception of me as somehow diminished by age. "It's not about money, Daniel. It's about purpose, connection, using my skills and knowledge. The same reasons I accepted the position at the community center." He nodded slowly. "I guess I just never thought of you as someone who'd want to work after retirement. Dad always said your dream was to travel and relax once you stopped working." "Your father had many misconceptions about me," I said dryly. "I never wanted to relax into oblivion. I wanted freedom to pursue my own interests and contribute in ways that matter to me." Daniel looked at me with new curiosity, as if seeing a side of me he hadn't recognized before. "You know, when I dropped by the bookshop yesterday to pick up Victoria's order, Martha couldn't stop singing your praises. Said you were a natural with the customers, especially the confused gentleman looking for that Churchill biography." So he had visited the bookshop, not just called as Victoria had suggested. Interesting. "Mr. Hendricks," I nodded. "He's researching his father's military service." I recommended several resources beyond the biography he initially wanted. Martha. "Said you're going to start a children's storytime program too." "Yes, on Saturday mornings," I confirmed. It seemed a good way to bring more families into the shop. Daniel shook his head slightly, a bemused smile on his face. "When did you become so entrepreneurial?" "I've always been this way," I answered honestly. "You just never had reason to notice before." The baby monitor lit up with sounds of Emma stirring. Daniel glanced at his watch. "That was a short nap." "About 45 minutes, I noted. "Typical for her age, especially in the morning." "Shall I get her, or would you like to?" "You go ahead," he said. "I need to make a quick work call, then I'll join you." I climbed the stairs to the nursery, where Emma was sitting up in her crib, her face brightening when she saw me. "Hello, sweetheart," I cooed, lifting her into my arms. "Did you have a good sleep?" After a diaper change, I carried her back, downstairs to find Daniel ending his call. "Everything okay at work?" I asked. "Just a client with last-minute changes to their financial plan," he said, reaching for Emma. Hey there, princess. Did you have fun with Grandma? Emma babbled happily, reaching back toward me even as Daniel held her. The gesture wasn't lost on him. Looks like someone's made a new friend, he commented. We've always been friends, I corrected. We're just getting to know each other better. Daniel bounced Emma gently in his arms. I should probably get back to the office. Victoria texted that she'll be home within the hour. Would you mind staying until she gets here? Not at all, I said. Emma and I still have the stuffed owl to open. I retrieved the small wrapped package from my bag. Daniel handed Emma back to me, watching as I helped her tear away the colorful paper to reveal the soft, textured owl with crinkly wings and a gentle rattle inside. Emma immediately clutched it to her chest, patting its fuzzy head with obvious delight. She loves it, Daniel observed. I thought she might. You had a similar one, a rabbit with long ears you could pull. You carried it everywhere until it practically disintegrated. Daniel's expression softened with surprise. I don't remember that. You wouldn't. You were younger than Emma, but I remember every detail. I hesitated, then added, I have photos if you'd ever like to see them. More than just the albums. I brought over. I'd like that, he said, sounding genuine rather than merely polite. Maybe next time we're at your house. After Daniel left, Emma and I continued our explorations with her new owl companion. We practiced standing, holding my fingers for balance, examined the interesting textures of various household objects, the smooth coolness of the coffee table, the rough weave of the area rug, and read another story from the neatly arranged bookshelf. Victoria returned just before noon, looking tired but professionally composed. She paused in the doorway, taking in the scene of Emma and me seated on the floor, surrounded by books. How did it go? She asked cautiously. Wonderfully, I replied, helping Emma to her feet as she reached toward her mother. She ate well, napped well, and we've been having a marvelous time exploring. Victoria took Emma, examining her as if checking for damage. Finding none, she relaxed slightly. Thank you for stepping in. It was a major client meeting I couldn't reschedule. I was happy to help, I said, beginning to gather my things. Emma is a joy to spend time with. Victoria glanced around the tidy living room, noting the stack of books and the new stuffed owl. You brought her a gift? Just a small one, I said. The texture is good for tactile development, and the gentle rattle provides auditory stimulation, without being overwhelming. Victoria raised her eyebrows, perhaps surprised by my knowledge of developmental toys. That's very thoughtful. And you cleaned up too. Of course, I said simply. I wanted to leave things as I found them. Victoria bounced Emma gently in her arms, her expression contemplative. Daniel mentioned you made homemade applesauce? Emma usually only eats the organic jarred kind I order specially. I used organic apples, I assured her. There's plenty left in the refrigerator if you'd like her to have it again tomorrow. Victoria nodded slowly. I'll try it. She can be picky about new foods. She seemed to enjoy it, I said, moving toward the door. I should let you two get back to your routine. If you need help again, please don't hesitate to ask. Actually, Victoria said, sounding uncharacteristically hesitant, our sitter is away until Monday. I have another client meeting on Friday morning. If you're available. I'd be delighted, I said immediately. Same time? 9 to 12, if that works? Perfect, I agreed. Emma and I will have another adventure. As I drove home, I reflected on the morning's success. Being trusted to care for Emma alone was a significant step forward, not just in my relationship with Victoria and Daniel, but in reclaiming my identity as a competent, valuable person in my own right. The experience had revealed something important. Victoria's controlling nature came at least partly from insecurity about her own parenting, not just from doubting my abilities. At home, I heated leftovers for lunch, then settled at my desk to make notes about the morning while the details were fresh in my mind. I wanted to remember which activities Emma had especially enjoyed, what had soothed her, what had engaged her curiosity. These observations would be useful not only for Friday's babysitting session, but also as I planned the children's storytime program at Turning Pages. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Mom, thank you again for today. Victoria mentioned, 'You're coming back Friday. I know this was last minute, but it means a lot to us.'" I smiled, typing back, "My pleasure entirely. Emma is wonderful company." A moment later, another text arrived, this one surprising me. "I saw Dr. Rivera's letter. Should have acknowledged it properly last week. Sorry about that. And sorry we ever made you feel you needed a doctor's note. To be with your granddaughter." The apology, though brief, felt significant. An acknowledgement not just of the medical assessment, but of the hurt they had caused. I responded simply, "Thank you, Daniel. That means a lot." In the afternoon, I visited Lakeview Park, walking the perimeter trail and enjoying the spring blossoms. The rain had cleared, leaving everything fresh and vibrant. As I rounded the lake, I spotted Judith Morgan on a bench, feeding the ducks, with her grandson. "Maggie," she called, waving me over. "Come meet Aiden." I joined them, smiling at the curly-headed 4-year-old enthusiastically tossing breadcrumbs to the gathering waterfowl. "Hello, Aiden. Those ducks certainly appreciate your generosity." Judith beamed with grandmotherly pride. "Aiden, this is Mrs. Reynolds. She used to be the head librarian when I was on the board." Aiden looked up briefly. "Do you know lots of stories?" "Hundreds," I assured him. "Perhaps someday you can come to the bookshop when I do storytime readings on Saturday mornings." This captured his interest more fully. "With voices for the different characters?" "Absolutely," I promised. "The best stories have distinctive voices." Judith laughed. "You've made a friend for life. Aiden lives for story time." Once the boy returned to feeding the ducks, she added, quietly, "So how are things with your son and daughter-in-law?" "Improving, I think," I said. "I babysat Emma this morning, and they've asked me to do it again on Friday." "Progress," Judith approved. "See? The keeping busy strategy works wonders. Nothing makes you more valuable than being slightly less available." "It wasn't intentional," I admitted. "But you're right. The new jobs seem to have shifted something in their perception of me." "Of course they have," Judith said. "You're no longer just waiting for their call, dependent on their approval for your happiness. You're living your own life, and that commands respect." After chatting a while longer, I continued my walk, Judith's words echoing in my mind. The positions at the bookshop and community center had indeed changed something fundamental in my relationship with Daniel and Victoria. By creating a life of purpose and engagement independent of my role as grandmother, I had paradoxically strengthened that very role. Thursday morning, I arrived at Daniel and Victoria's house at my usual time, curious to see if yesterday's babysitting success would influence Victoria's attitude. Daniel opened the door, Emma in his arms. "Mom, perfect timing," he said, kissing my cheek. "Victoria's just finishing up a conference call. Come in." I followed him into the kitchen, where Emma's breakfast was in progress. Small pieces of banana and cereal arranged in neat sections on her high chair tray. "Good morning, sweet girl," I greeted her, receiving a banana-smeared smile in return. Victoria appeared moments later, her expression surprisingly relaxed. "Margaret, good morning. Emma's been asking for Gaga all morning. I think she was talking about you." The idea that Emma might have a special name for me warmed my heart immeasurably. "Has she? Well, Gaga is very happy to see her too." "Coffee?" Daniel offered, already pouring me a cup. "Thank you," I said, accepting it gratefully. "How was the rest of your day yesterday?" Victoria surprised me by answering directly, without her usual deflection. "Better than expected. Emma was in a wonderful mood after your visit. The applesauce was a hit. She actually asked for more at dinner." I'm glad, I said, pleased by the acknowledgement. I've written down the recipe if you'd like it. I would, actually, Victoria said, with what appeared to be genuine interest. I've been thinking about making more of her food from scratch, but it's hard to find the time with work. It doesn't have to be complicated, I offered. I used to batch cook for Daniel on weekends, then freeze portions in ice cube trays. Easy to thaw what you need each day. Victoria looked intrigued rather than defensive. That's actually a clever system. Maybe you could show me sometime? I'd be happy to, I said, surprised and pleased by this unexpected opening. The visit unfolded with a noticeably different tone than previous weeks. Victoria seemed less anxious, less intent on controlling every interaction I had with Emma. When I offered to hold the baby while Victoria assembled a portfolio for a client meeting, she handed Emma over without hesitation or instruction. Daniel, too, seemed more relaxed, joining us in the living room rather than retreating to his home office as he often did during my visits. We talked about his work, Victoria's latest design project, and my plans for the children's storytime program at the bookshop. You should bring Emma, I suggested. The first session is next Saturday at 10. We might do that, Daniel said, looking to Victoria for confirmation. It sounds nice, she agreed. Emma loves books already. The conversation turned to the upcoming weekend, with Daniel mentioning a neighborhood barbecue they'd been invited to. You should come too, Mom, he said. It's at the Hendersons on Saturday evening. Lots of families with kids, but some people our age as well. The Morgans will be there. You know Judith from the library board, right? Yes? I just saw her at the park yesterday, I said, touched by the inclusion. I'd love to come. Victoria nodded. Great. It starts at 5. Very casual, just burgers and such. I'll bring a dessert, I offered, already planning a strawberry rhubarb crumble that had always been Daniel's favorite. As the visit drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on the subtle but significant shift in atmosphere. There was an ease to our interactions that had been missing for months, perhaps longer. Victoria's protective barriers seemed slightly lowered, Daniel's attentiveness to my perspective more genuine. So we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9? Victoria confirmed as I prepared to leave. I'll be here, I promised. Emma and I have big plans involving a puppet I'm bringing, and perhaps a visit to the garden if the weather cooperates. Victoria smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. She'll love that. Thank you again for helping us out. Daniel walked me to the door, Emma in his arms. See you tomorrow, Mom, and thanks for being so flexible with all this. As I drove home, I found myself questioning whether I still needed to consider changes to Emma's trust. The improvements in my relationship with Daniel and Victoria were promising, but were they substantive and lasting, or merely the temporary gratitude of parents in need of childcare? At a traffic light, I checked my phone to find a text from Sophia Patel, the financial advisor Walter had recommended. Looking forward to our lunch tomorrow. I've reviewed the trust documents Walter sent and have several interesting options to discuss. Our appointment was set for 1 o'clock, directly after my babysitting session with Emma. The timing seemed almost symbolic, moving from hands-on grandmothering to financial strategy without missing a beat. Both were forms of care, different expressions of my commitment to Emma's future. That evening, I decided to make the puppet I'd promised to bring for Emma. A simple sock creation with button eyes and yarn hair, but with special features designed to engage a baby's developing senses. I added small bells inside the head for sound, different textured fabrics for tactile exploration, and bright contrasting colors to attract her visual attention. As I stitched, I thought about the calculated risk I was taking in even considering changes to Emma's trust. If Daniel and Victoria discovered I was exploring my options, they might see it as manipulation or even threat, potentially damaging the fragile progress we'd made. Yet maintaining the possibility of change gave me a sense of agency I hadn't felt in years, a reminder that I was not powerless in this relationship. The puppet took shape under my hands, a tangible symbol of the grandmother I wanted to be. Creative, engaged, attuned to Emma's needs and development. Whatever happened with the trust funds, this was the legacy that mattered most. The relationship, the memories, the love transmitted through small, thoughtful gestures. My phone rang as I was adding the finishing touches to the puppet. The screen showed Victoria calling, an unprecedented event that immediately sent a flutter of concern through me. "Hello?" I answered quickly. "Margaret, hi," Victoria said, her voice surprisingly warm. "I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all," I assured her. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," she said. "I just wanted to ask, the applesauce recipe you mentioned, could you bring it tomorrow? And maybe any other baby food recipes you think might work for Emma? I was thinking about what you said regarding batch cooking on weekends." The request, so normal between a mother and grandmother, nearly brought tears to my eyes. "Of course. I have a whole collection of recipes I used for Daniel. I'll bring them tomorrow." "Thank you," Victoria said. "And one more thing. Daniel mentioned you have photos from when he was a baby, with the stuffed rabbit I didn't know about?" "I do," I confirmed. "Albums full of them, actually. Would you consider bringing those sometime too? I'd really like to see what Emma's father was like at her age." "I'd love to," I said, my heart full. "Perhaps for our regular visit next week?" "Perfect," Victoria agreed. "Well, that's all I wanted to ask. See you tomorrow morning." After we hung up, I sat for a long while with the puppet in my lap, turning this new development over in my mind. Victoria had reached out voluntarily, expressing interest in my experience and knowledge, acknowledging my history with Daniel in a way she never had before. It wasn't a complete transformation. One phone call couldn't erase months of dismissive behavior. But it was a beginning, an opening, a small bridge extending across the chasm that had grown between us. I finished the puppet, setting it aside, for tomorrow's adventure with Emma. Then I went to my bookshelf, pulling down the album from Daniel's first year. The photos inside captured hundreds of moments. Daniel's first smile, first steps, first words, all meticulously documented with dates and notes in my neat handwriting. Victoria wanted to see these images, to connect her daughter's life with her husband's earliest days. Perhaps in doing so, she might also see me more clearly, not as an aging woman with shaky hands, but as the mother who had documented every milestone, celebrated every achievement, created every recipe with love and care. The calculated risk I had taken in accepting these new roles, bookshop employee, reading program coordinator, confident grandmother with her own life and purpose, was already yielding results. Not through confrontation or financial leverage, but through a quiet demonstration of capability and value that was becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss. Tomorrow, I would have lunch with Sophia Patel and explore my options regarding Emma's trust. I would listen carefully, ask thoughtful questions, and consider all possibilities. But I would make no hasty decisions, no reactive changes. The trust remained an important tool, but perhaps its greatest value lay in reminding me that I had choices, that I was not merely a recipient of whatever role Victoria and Daniel deigned to give me. As I returned the album to the shelf, my gaze fell on a framed photo from Daniel's 5th birthday, the two of us laughing together as he blew out candles on a homemade cake. That authentic connection, that genuine joy in each other's company, was what I wanted to rebuild. For Emma's sake, for Daniel's, and for my own. Friday morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through my kitchen windows as I gathered everything for my day ahead. The handmade puppet sat beside my purse, its colorful yarn hair and button eyes seeming to watch as I collected the folder of baby food recipes I'd promised Victoria. I'd spent part of the previous evening typing them up, adding notes about Daniel's preferences and reactions to different combinations. I arrived at Daniel and Victoria's house precisely at 9, finding Victoria already dressed for her meeting in a tailored navy suit. "Margaret, right on time," she greeted me, sounding genuinely relieved. "Emma's just finishing breakfast. Daniel left early for a client breakfast downtown." I followed her to the kitchen where Emma sat in her high chair, industriously smashing banana pieces between her fingers. Her face lit up when she saw me, and she immediately reached out with sticky hands. "Someone's happy to see you," Victoria observed, her tone surprisingly warm. "Let me clean her up before you take her." As Victoria efficiently wiped Emma's hands and face, I set down my bag and the folder of recipes. "I brought the recipes we talked about. I've included notes about freezing instructions and which combinations Daniel particularly enjoyed." Victoria glanced at the neatly organized folder with appreciation. "This is perfect. I'm planning to try some this weekend." She lifted Emma from the high chair and transferred her to my waiting arms. "Her morning routine is the same as Wednesday. I've set out books and toys in the living room, and there are extra clothes in the nursery top drawer of the changing table," I finished for her with a smile. "Don't worry, Victoria. We'll be fine." She nodded, picking up her briefcase. "Of course. I've added your cell number to my favorites in case anything comes up. I should be back by noon, but I'll text if I'm running late." "Take your time," I assured her. "Emma and I have plenty to keep us occupied." After Victoria left, Emma and I established our own rhythm for the morning. Rather than following Victoria's precise schedule, I let Emma's interests and energy guide our activities. We started with the puppet I'd brought, Emma shrieking with delight at the jingling sounds it made when shaken. The different textures fascinated her, and she spent nearly 20 minutes examining the puppet from every angle, occasionally offering it to me before taking it back. When she began to lose interest, I carried her to the large picture window to watch the birds at the feeder in the backyard. "Look, Emma," I said softly. "See the red cardinal? And the little chickadee?" Her wide eyes followed my pointing finger, her small body alert with curiosity. After a while, I brought her to the bookshelf, selecting a board book about animals. We settled on the floor, Emma in my lap, as I read the simple story, encouraging her to touch the different textured patches representing fur, feathers, and scales. Around 10:30, I noticed her rubbing her eyes, the signal that nap time was approaching. I carried her upstairs to the nursery, settling into the rocking chair. As I hummed a lullaby, Emma nestled against my chest, her eyelids growing heavy. Within minutes, she was asleep, her soft breath warm against my neck. I held her for nearly 30 minutes, savoring the weight of her in my arms, before carefully transferring her to the crib. There was something profoundly healing about these quiet moments, a reconnection to the essence of grandmothering that transcended the tensions with Daniel and Victoria. While Emma slept, I used the time to straighten up downstairs, then sat at the kitchen table reviewing the documents Sophia Patel had sent in preparation for our lunch meeting. The financial options were more complex than I'd initially understood, with various structures offering different combinations of security, flexibility, and control. I was still reading when my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Meeting. Running long. We'll probably be closer to 12:30. Is that okay?" "Absolutely fine," I replied. "Emma's still napping. Take your time." I returned to the financial documents, making notes about questions to ask Sophia. The trust had grown significantly since I'd established it, thanks to some fortunate investments, and now represented a substantial portion of my net worth. Any changes would need careful consideration, not just for Emma's future, but for my own financial security as well. I was interrupted by sounds from the baby monitor. Emma was awake, chattering happily to herself in the crib. I went upstairs to find her sitting up, clutching the stuffed owl I'd given her earlier in the week. "Hello, sweet girl," I cooed, lifting her into my arms. "Did you have a good sleep?" After a diaper change and fresh clothes, we returned downstairs. Emma was energetic after her nap, crawling rapidly across the living room floor in pursuit. of rolling toys. I sat nearby, encouraging her explorations while ensuring she didn't encounter anything dangerous. At one point, she pulled herself up to standing using the coffee table, swaying precariously for a moment before sitting down hard. Instead of crying, she immediately tried again, her determination evident in her furrowed brow. "You're going to be walking soon," I predicted, offering my fingers for her to grasp for balance. "Your daddy was just the same, determined to be mobile as quickly as possible." Emma managed 3 wobbly steps holding my fingers before plopping down again, a triumphant grin on her face. I praised her enthusiastically, delighting in her obvious pride. The front door opened at 12:20, Victoria appearing with an apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry to be late," she said, setting down her briefcase. The client had endless questions. "No need to apologize," I assured her. "Emma and I have been having a wonderful time. She just took a few steps holding my fingers." Victoria's eyes widened. "Really? She's been pulling up on furniture but hasn't tried walking yet with me or Daniel." "She's very determined," I said, watching as Emma crawled rapidly toward her mother. The physical therapist who visited the library used to say that babies often attempt new skills with people who are slightly less familiar, less pressure to perform, perhaps. Victoria scooped Emma up, kissing her cheek. "Did you have fun? With Grandma Maggie?" Emma babbled in response, reaching one hand back toward me while maintaining her grip on Victoria's necklace with the other. I began gathering my things, conscious of my upcoming appointment with Sophia. She had a good nap, about an hour and 15 minutes, and she's had water but probably needs lunch soon. Victoria nodded, then surprised me by asking, "Would you like to stay and have lunch with us?" I picked up sandwiches on the way home. The invitation was tempting, but I needed to keep my appointment with Sophia. "That's very kind, but I actually have a lunch meeting in town. A financial advisor, boring retirement planning stuff." "Of course," Victoria said, sounding genuinely disappointed. "Another time, then." "I'd like that," I agreed, touched by the sincerity in her tone. "And don't forget, I'll be at the neighborhood barbecue tomorrow evening." "We're looking forward to it," Victoria said, following me to the door with Emma. "Thank you again for today, Margaret. You've been a lifesaver this week." I smiled, touching Emma's cheek gently. "The pleasure was all mine. See you tomorrow, sweet girl." As I drove to meet Sophia, I reflected on the subtle but significant changes in Victoria's attitude. The woman who had once questioned my ability to hold my granddaughter now trusted me with her care for hours at a time. The shift represented more than just practical necessity. There was a growing recognition in her eyes, an acknowledgement of my competence and value that hadn't been there before. Sophia Patel's office was located in a modern building downtown, her corner suite offering impressive views of the lake. At 45, she projected confidence and approachability in equal measure, her handshake firm as she greeted me. "Mrs. Reynolds, thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from her desk. "Walter speaks very highly of you." "Please call me Maggie," I replied, settling into the chair. "Walter mentioned you specialize in family trusts and intergenerational wealth planning." "That's right," Sophia confirmed, opening a folder that contained copies of the trust documents Walter had shared. "I've reviewed the current structure of your granddaughter's trust. It's well designed for educational support and a solid financial foundation when she comes of age." I nodded. That was the intention. Emma's parents are doing well financially, but I wanted to ensure she had options for her education and early adult life. "A generous and thoughtful gift," Sophia agreed. "Walter mentioned you're considering some possible adjustments to the structure or terms. May I ask what's prompting that consideration?" I hesitated, unsure how much personal context to share. Sophia seemed to sense my reservation and smiled reassuringly. In my experience, she said gently, financial decisions regarding family trusts are rarely just about money. There's usually an underlying relationship dynamic at work. Her perception gave me permission to be more candid. My relationship with my son and daughter-in-law has been challenging lately. They've been somewhat dismissive of my role in Emma's life, questioning my capabilities because of my age. I see, Sophia said, her expression understanding rather than judgmental. And you're considering using the trust as leverage to ensure your continued involvement in your granddaughter's life? Put so bluntly, it sounded manipulative, even petty. That wasn't my initial thought, I admitted. It was more about feeling powerless and wanting to reclaim some agency. But things have actually improved recently. In what way? I explained the developments of the past week, the babysitting opportunities, Victoria's increasing willingness to value my experience and knowledge, the subtle shift in how they treated me. So I'm less inclined toward dramatic changes now, but I still want to understand my options. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. It's always good to know what's possible, even if you choose not to act immediately. Based on what you've shared, let me outline some approaches that might align with your current thinking. For the next hour, we discussed various trust structures and conditions. Sophia was thorough and patient, explaining complex financial concepts in accessible terms and addressing each of my questions with respect and clarity. Unlike some financial advisors I'd encountered who seemed to view older women as financially naive, she treated me as a capable decision-maker with legitimate concerns and goals. By the end of our meeting, I had a much clearer understanding of my options, though I wasn't yet ready to commit to specific changes. Take your time considering these approaches, Sophia advised as our lunch concluded. Financial decisions with emotional components shouldn't be rushed. I'll send detailed information about each option for you to review at your convenience. I thanked her for her insights and understanding, leaving the meeting with both clarity and calm. The trust remained an important tool, but I now saw it less as a weapon in a power struggle and more as an opportunity to transmit values and create meaningful connections across generations. Saturday arrived with perfect weather for both the bookshop storytime and the evening barbecue. The storytime session was a resounding success, with Emma in attendance, safely nestled in Daniel's lap as I read stories and led the children in interactive activities. Victoria watched with obvious admiration as I kept a dozen young children engaged and delighted for 40 minutes. "That was impressive, Margaret," she said afterward, sounding genuinely admiring. "You have quite a gift with children." They were completely captivated. The neighborhood barbecue that evening brought another unexpected moment of recognition. As I chatted with old friends, I overheard Victoria speaking to a woman I didn't recognize. "Emma's grandmother is actually the former head librarian," Victoria was saying, a note of pride in her voice. "She's been an incredible resource for us, especially now that Emma's starting to show interest in books. We're lucky to have her expertise." The simple acknowledgement, offered to a stranger when Victoria had no reason to expect I would overhear, touched me profoundly. It wasn't said for my benefit or to smooth over tension. It was a genuine expression of appreciation for what I contributed to Emma's life. As the gathering wound down, Victoria surprised me with an invitation. "We've been thinking about starting a regular family dinner tradition, maybe Sunday evenings? Nothing elaborate, just a chance for Emma to have consistent time with both her parents and her grandmother." The suggestion caught me by surprise. A voluntary invitation to be part of their regular routine, not just an occasional visitor or emergency babysitter. "I'd like that very much," I said, careful to keep my voice steady despite the emotion welling up. "Good," Victoria said simply. "We'll start tomorrow if that works for you. Around 5? 5 is perfect," I agreed, my heart full. Sunday evening arrived, and I found myself preparing for the first of what would become our weekly family dinners. I chose to bring a homemade loaf of rosemary bread and a small gift for Emma, a picture book about a grandmother owl and her grandchild exploring the forest together. Victoria welcomed me warmly, immediately taking my coat and ushering me into their kitchen where Daniel was preparing a roast chicken. Emma, sitting in her high chair, squealed with delight when she saw me. "She's been watching the door for the past half hour," Victoria said with a smile. "I think she was expecting you." I went to Emma, kissing her soft cheek and presenting the book. "Look what Grandma brought you, sweet girl." As Daniel finished dinner preparations, Victoria surprised me by asking for help with the table settings. "I thought we might use the good china," she said, "since this is our first official family dinner." The simple inclusion, being asked to help rather than merely accommodated, spoke volumes about the shift in our relationship. As we worked side by side, Victoria mentioned casually, "You know, Emma's baptism is coming up next month. We were hoping you might read one of the scripture passages during the service." "I'd be honored," I said, touched by the request that acknowledged both my importance in Emma's life and my knowledge of religious literature. "And," Victoria added, a bit hesitantly, "I was wondering if you might have something special Emma could wear. Daniel mentioned you kept his christening gown." "I do," I confirmed, surprised and moved that she would want this connection to family history. "It's beautiful Belgian lace. My mother wore it, then me, then Daniel. I've kept it preserved all these years." "That would be perfect," Victoria said softly. 4 generations wearing the same gown. What a wonderful tradition to continue. As we gathered around the table, Emma now transferred to her high chair between Victoria and me. Daniel raised his glass in a toast. "To family dinners," he said, simply. "And to new traditions." We clinked glasses, the moment holding more significance than mere words could express. As we ate, the conversation flowed easily, touching on work, community events, and plans for Emma's future. For the first time in years, I felt fully present and valued in my son's home, not as an obligation or occasional helper, but as an essential part of their family fabric. After dinner, as Victoria cleared the plates, I sat with Emma in the living room, reading her new book, her little body nestled trustingly against mine, her attention completely focused on the pictures and my voice. Daniel watched from the doorway, his expression soft with an emotion I couldn't quite name. "You know, Mom," he said quietly, "watching you with Emma these past few weeks has made me remember so many things from my own childhood. The way you always made time to read to me, no matter how busy you were. The special voices you used for different characters. The patience you had explaining complicated ideas until I understood." His words wrapped around my heart like a healing balm. "Those are some of my most precious memories," I told him. "Mine too," he admitted. "And I want Emma to have those same kinds of memories with you." Victoria joined us, settling on the sofa nearby. "I was thinking," she said tentatively, "that when Emma starts walking more steadily, perhaps you could take her to the children's programs at the library. Begin that tradition early?" "I'd love that," I said, deeply moved by this invitation, to share something so fundamental to my identity with my granddaughter. The evening continued with more conversation, more shared plans, more moments of connection. When it was time for me to leave, Victoria hugged me, a genuine embrace rather than the perfunctory air kisses of the past. "Same time next week?" she asked. "I wouldn't miss it," I promised. As Daniel walked me to my car, he hesitated, then said, "Mom, I'm sorry for how things have been. For not seeing how Victoria and I were making you feel. For not standing up for you when I should have." "Thank you," I said simply, accepting the apology for what it was. Imperfect, but sincere. "The trust fund for Emma," he added awkwardly. "Victoria and I have talked about it. We want you to know that whatever you decide to do with it is your decision. Emma will be fine financially either way. What matters most is that she has you in her life." His words confirmed what I had already begun to realize. The trust fund was never really about money or control. It was about recognition, respect, and a place at the table. "The trust will always be there for Emma," I assured him. "But I've been considering some adjustments that might better reflect my values and create opportunities for us to remain connected as she grows." Daniel nodded. "Whatever you decide, we trust your judgment." Those 5 words, "we trust your judgment," represented the most profound shift in our relationship, a recognition of my wisdom and capability that transcended any financial arrangement. 3 days later, I met with Walter and Sophia to finalize the changes to Emma's trust. We structured it as a combination of educational support, milestone-based distributions, and a small family foundation component that would involve both Emma and me in philanthropic decisions as she matured. "This creates a beautiful legacy," Sophia observed as we reviewed the final documents. "Not just financial security, but values and connection across generations." "That's exactly what I wanted," I said, signing the papers with a steady hand. "A bridge between past and future." As I left the office, my phone chimed with a text from Victoria. "Emma took 3 steps on her own this morning, sending video. She keeps looking for you. Can you stop by after work today? We'd love to see." "You?" I smiled, watching the short clip of my granddaughter's wobbly first steps, her face alight with determination and joy. The trust documents in my bag represented security for Emma's financial future, but the message on my phone represented something far more valuable: my place in her life, freely given and genuinely wanted. In the end, I never needed to change the trust fund beneficiary as a power move. What had begun as a desperate attempt to assert control had evolved into something much more meaningful, a thoughtful legacy that reflected my values and created opportunities for lasting connection. The transformation in my relationship with Daniel and Victoria hadn't come from financial leverage or confrontation, but from a quieter, more powerful demonstration of my continued capability, wisdom, and worth. By building a life rich with purpose and engagement, I had changed how they saw me, and perhaps more importantly, how I saw myself. As I drove toward my son's house, anticipating Emma's delight when I appeared, I knew that the greatest inheritance I could leave my granddaughter wasn't money or property, but the example of a woman who refused to be diminished by age or circumstance, who at 65 had reinvented herself and reclaimed her rightful place in her family's life. Not through ultimatums or revenge, but through living fully and authentically, demonstrating rather than demanding the respect she deserved. That was a legacy worth more than any trust fund could ever provide. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.